The Dark Souls series is known for being brutally difficult. Dark Souls 3 is no different. It takes less than 5 minutes from the start of the game to get to the first boss, which for a lot of people is a major roadblock. Having a boss this early on before the player can get a chance to properly learn the game first seems like bad design. Or does it? I recently watched videos on good tutorials in gaming, and it got me thinking, maybe Dark Souls 3 actually does a good job of teaching the player how to play the game. On the surface, Dark Souls 3's tutorial is pretty bland. You walk forward and read a bunch of messages on the ground that tell you what buttons to press, and then the tutorial is over. It's kind of boring, lots of telling and no showing. And then you get to Udex Gundyr, who, to those uninitiated to the Dark Souls series, seems like a completely brutal first boss. Going off of Xbox achievement statistics, about 77% of players make it to the first bonfire before Gundyr. The number of players that actually beat Gundyr after reaching that bonfire is about 66%. Just over 1 in every 10 people that make it to Gundyr stop playing entirely before they are able to beat him. By the time you get to Gundyr, you've had the chance to test all the buttons out on the enemies along the way. Gundyr serves as your first test for how well you've picked up the controls and mechanics of the game, and if you haven't quite wrapped your head around how to play, then Gundyr serves as your teacher. There are several things that Gundyr does to subtly show you how combat in Dark Souls 3 works. When you enter Gundyr's arena for the first time, nothing happens. The player finds that Gundyr is frozen in place, melt down in the center of the arena. It is up to the player to decide when to pull the sword out of him and start the fight. The player can also land a few free hits while Gundyr stands up before the fight actually starts. This makes the fight unique in that it is the only one that the player directly has to start themselves by pressing a button on the boss. Every enemy in Dark Souls 3 telegraphs their attacks. What makes things more complicated down the line is that it gets harder to tell what kind of attack is coming based on the telegraph. Gundyr shows the player a very basic and easy to understand introduction to telegraphing. He doesn't throw any curveballs at the player, and most of his attacks have a nice long wind-up for the player to recognize what is coming and how to dodge it. Nearly every boss has a second phase in Dark Souls 3. This usually happens around the halfway point in the boss's health bar, and is followed by a brief pause in the fight as they change gears and switch up their attacks. This can be accompanied by a change in appearance as well, though this only happens in a handful of bosses. Gundyr makes it a point to have an extremely obvious second phase that happens around the halfway point in his health bar. He stops combat entirely and grows a giant snake-like blob with a claw out of his body that gives him better reach. Gundyr's attacks after this point are very different and force the player to accommodate for this new snake appendage. A convenient comparison between Udex Gundyr and how hard late-game bosses can get is Champion Gundyr, an optional hidden boss that you can fight once you're about 90% of the way done with the game. Champion Gundyr's identical appearance to Udex Gundyr, takes place in an identical arena, and has many of the same attacks. The difference is that this fight is much harder than the Udex fight. His first phase is also identical to the Udex fight, but it's the second phase where things differ. The second phase happens about halfway through his health bar, but this time the only physical change is that his eyes glow red. He becomes much more aggressive, adds 5 more attacks to his arsenal, and begins attacking in bigger combos. By this point in the game, the champion fight offers much the same challenge that Udex did for new players at the start of the game. Dark Souls 3 has a high barrier of entry, but Udex teaches the player how combat works in an elegant way, pushing them over that barrier and preparing them for the challenges that the rest of the game has to offer.